Welcome to the info session and Q&A with a panel of Undergraduate Research Ambassadors. The Undergraduate Research Ambassadors program is an opportunity provided by the Undergraduate Research Center, also known as the URC. I'm Dee Clark, the program specialist at the URC, and I'd like to ask first Maddie and then Thomas to give a quick introduction, and then I'll hand things over to Maddie for the Kahoot quiz.
Hi, I'm Maddie. I'm a fourth year microbiology major, and I've been doing research since my second year here at UC Davis. I'm currently in the Binet lab, and I am studying the microbiome of the valley carpenter bee, specifically to see if geographic location changes the composition and structure of the microbiome. And I'm currently doing field research out at Anza-Borrego Desert State Park.
Thank you. Thomas.
Hey everyone, thanks for coming. So my name is Thomas. I'm a transfer student. This is my second year here, so I'm a senior now. I'm actually in two labs. So in the first lab is a protein design lab where, as you can imagine, we're designing proteins. Not to go into too much detail there, because it kind of gets a little boring, but I'm doing two projects in the first lab, and both projects are pending publication. And then the second lab that I'm doing, I'm working in Dr. Wan's lab as essentially a computer engineer or software developer. And I am developing an algorithm in Python for image processing of tissues. So a lot of computational work for me.
Thank you, Thomas. I've also put their information into the chat for your reference for the participants. And now I'll hand it back to Maddie.
Yeah, so we're going to do a Kahoot game. It's just sort of a way to get everybody participating and to give you a little bit of information about the URA program and maybe spark some questions that you might have. So you can go to Kahoot and then enter the game pin, and it should take you to the page where you'll enter your nickname, and then we can get started once everybody has joined. Give it a few more minutes. But if you don't want to join, that's okay. You can still learn.
Thank you for joining, Sarah, Eric, Luis, and Flora. While we give it another minute, I'm going to put our email and our URC website in the chat as well. So you know where to ask more questions.
Okay, I think we'll get started. The 4 people, so it'll just be a little competition between you 4. Okay, so the URAs are undergraduate peer mentors. We are not technically UCD faculty. We are students. Next. Okay, so job of the URAs is to give students advice and share their personal experience with research. True or false? Yep, so that seems pretty obvious, but it is true. Okay, now they're true or false. No research opportunities are available during distance learning. Exactly, false. There are plenty of research opportunities that are available, and we can discuss that later during the Q&A if you would like. Okay, so what is the benefit of undergraduate research? You can earn class credit, build technical skills. Okay, well, yes. So all of these, and there are many more benefits. Undergraduate research is a great opportunity to, add things to your resume. You can make great connections with your faculty mentor and receive a letter of recommendation. And you can earn class credit. You can even get paid sometimes, which is nice. Okay, true or false? You can only get started in research by cold emailing professors. Okay, false. So cold emailing is one way to get in contact with faculty, but there are other ways. There are programs through the URC that can help you get started in research. You could also talk to your TAs or other graduate students. These are some of the ways, and we can talk more about it during the Q&A. Okay, you can look for research opportunities in departments other than that of your major. True or false? True, yes. So a great way to find research opportunities is to look at other departments, because you can always find projects that you will be interested in other departments. For example, I'm a microbiology major, but I'm in an entomology lab, but I'm still doing microbiome research, which is what I'm interested in. Okay, true or false? Only graduate students have their own research projects. Yes. So as an undergrad, you can have your own research projects, and there are even grants and fellowships that you can apply to fund them. Okay, so what should you include when you email a professor? Yep, all of these, you should definitely include your resume. You should definitely reference their research, maybe even mention some of the papers that they've published, and you should definitely mention why you want to be in their lab. Okay, true or false? Research is only for people who want to go to graduate school. Yep, false. Research is for everyone. Research means solely working in a scientific lab. Yep, that is false. There are many different research labs, not just scientific labs, and you can also do literature reviews as well, which is a part of research. Okay, true or false? A job of the URAs is to put students in personal contact with professors. Okay, so that is false. We will not put you in personal contact with professors, but we will share our research experience. We can potentially put you in contact with a professor, but that's not necessarily one of our jobs that we have to do. Okay, and the best way to contact the URC is? Yes, so it is to email the URC at urc@ucdavis.edu. Usually it would be to go to the Student Community Center, but of course, we are online right now. So the best way is to email. Okay. Good job, Lewis.
Congratulations. Thank you. Those were great questions. And now we're going to open it up to the participants to ask questions for either Thomas or Maddie or both. And I'm going to check the chat room here. And I'll wait a moment for you to come up with a question that's rattling around your head, and give it a little space. I have a question to sort of warm us up here. Can each of you tell us how you got your research position? Share that experience. You shared a little bit of knowledge about that in the quiz. So it'd be great to hear about how that happened for you. Maddie, would you like to go first?
Sure. So I got started in my lab. I actually applied for the Research Scholars Program in Insect Biology, and I got into that. And so they actually placed me in a lab. I had a couple of choices. They have a bunch of different mentors involved in the program. And so through that program, I was able to be placed in my lab.
Thomas?
For me, despite being in McNair, I ultimately still had to cold call and email professors. And I'm applying to graduate school now, so it's very similar process. So I emailed 8 or 10 professors. 5 of them got back to me. We all interviewed, but at the same time, like, I knew the one particular lab that I wanted to be in, the first lab, Dr. Siegel's lab for protein design, is the best fit for my research interest. And so even though I had 4 other interviews and I all got in on the spot, which I can help talk about that, I kind of just told them, like, hey, I want to be in this lab, so just like, let's wait until we hear back. Fortunately, I got into the lab that I wanted to be in. And the story for the second lab was I wanted to make the class better for our chemical engineering. And I didn't mention my major, by the way, just realizing that now. But I didn't like how the class was being taught, to be honest. And then I brought that concern up to the professors and I recommended some solutions, and I actively engaged and kept in communication, wanting to better the class. And so through that effort, you know, building that connection and just having that confidence to communicate with your professor, he invited me to his lab, and then he and I are now working on that programming algorithm for tissue image analysis. So, yeah.
I have a question from Lewis. How competitive are research positions?
I can add to that a little bit for how competitive it is. So, and I'll also add on my experience as well. So I guess you could say also cold called, but I think that's a great way to reach out to professors directly and just talk a little about their research. And if you want, we can talk about like how to personalize that email too. But in terms of how competitive research positions are, I think that, you know, right now, because of COVID, a lot of undergrads aren't necessarily doing as much research like in the lab, and it's a lot of like virtual things going on. But I don't think that that necessarily makes it more competitive. And I've never really found that, you know, you really have to compete for a position. I think it's pretty, I think if you really showed true interest in a lab, then most of the time they want to take you because, for one, your help, you'll end up helping them in some way. And there's a big payoff there for them. And also, you know, a lot of people want to mentor and add to their field and, you know, help undergrads. So I wouldn't say it's necessarily competitive. That hasn't been my experience as well for me. So I'll let other people answer that too.
For me, there's like over 20 undergraduates in my lab, and over 150 have passed through the lab. So no, there's room for everyone. If your PI or lab is taking undergraduates.
Yeah, one of the reasons why I actually came to UC Davis was because I found that faculty were really willing to want to help students, and they really wanted like first years and second years, and they really wanted to get people involved in research and help you on your journey. So I think that faculty are really receptive to having undergraduates in research, and there's a lot of opportunities.
Definitely. And if I could add to that as well, I think when I was a freshman, I remember asking people like, oh, I want to go to grad school. Like, how should I prepare for that? And then they'd say, oh, you can like join a lab your third or fourth year. And you totally can. But I think that also professors like it when you're young, when you're like a first or second year, so that they can spend more time training you, and then you can stay with that lab for a longer period of time. There's a higher payoff phase for them. So just to add.
Thank you. Sarah, you joined us just a little bit late. We missed your introduction. Would you mind going ahead and just giving yourself a short introduction?
Yeah, of course. Sorry about that. So my
Oh.
name is Sarah Sheridan. I'm a fourth year biochemistry and molecular biology major. I've been in a lab since my freshman year, and in Dr. Whistler's lab. So we're working on sort of neurology and addiction, and studying the biochemical pathways that are involved there. So yeah, anything else you want to know, just ask.
We have a question regarding finding out about what kind of research might be best for you. So exploring your interests. Do you have any advice on that point?
For me, my interest actually started out of a class. So when I was sitting in my second quarter semester of general chemistry, we learned this thing called like catalysts that like make things go faster. They make chemical reactions go faster. And then you start wondering like, well, how do they make it go faster? So then you realize later on in your academic career, and this is where the comment about joining a lab in junior or senior year comes in, particularly junior year, is when you start learning more in your sophomore year. In organic chemistry, they say, oh, the enzymes are biological catalysts that change the energy of these two states. It's like, oh, that's super cool. But like, now what are enzymes? It's just like, for me, it was just being curious on what I'm learning in classes, to be honest. But if you already know what you want to do outside of the class, in particular for me as a transfer, I'm coming into a university, I'm hoping there's a lab here that does, enzyme research. So I came in with that predetermined knowledge coming in as a junior. So I had to actively seek out that interest, but that interest didn't develop just me sitting alone, like doing nothing. It was, studying and just being curious of what I'm learning about, what I'm being exposed to.
Yeah, I would say one way to sort of figure out your interests would be to read papers and literature. And if there's an article that really sparks your interest, then you can just start reading more about that. And I think that's a great way to kind of figure it out a little bit.
There's a couple other places you can look to see what kind of research is being done on campus. You can go to your major department's webpage and check out the faculty pages there and click on the faculty names, and you can see what kind of research they've been doing or what their labs are. And you can also check out our abstract books from the Undergraduate Research Conference, because it's got all kinds of abstracts from research projects that have been done with faculty that engage with undergraduates. And you can kind of glance through those, and it can also see what kinds of things are being done and maybe spark some interest for you. And I put a link in the chat just now for people that are just getting started in research. And I'm also going to put a link for our conference abstracts. And let me see what the next question is here. Do you have any tips for getting to know faculty professors during their office hours?
I can start. we were just joking about this earlier. Once you get a researcher start talking about their research, like we just don't stop. So it's just like that's one tactic I personally do. It's like, hey, so tell me about your research, and then you're just thinking like, oh, okay, that's super cool. And then like as they're talking, you're like, okay, there's that one thing that caught my attention. And then while they're speaking, in the back of your head, you're just thinking, all right, I got to remember this point, and then ask for a follow up question. And then they're gonna go on another rant for like 5 minutes, and you do the exact same thing, and it's great. That's my best advice.
Yeah, I would maybe just say that you're like looking for advice from them. I think they're definitely willing to help you. Maybe ask relevant questions, find out if they have any suggestions.
I think office hours is a really good way. I've also seen people kind of be a little bit like indirect about it though. And I think that if you're really like, if you want to join their lab, you can like outright say like, oh, I read your research and I think it's really interesting and I want to join your lab. I think being direct helps because they deal with a lot of different students and they're not really sure. They might not pick up on the vibe that you're hinting, you're kind of hinting that you want to join the lab or not. So.
And for those of you who are waiting on the links, I realized that I was sending them to everybody in the waiting room, which is empty. So I'm starting to add those back into the regular chat.
I see a question from Eric that says that he's a fourth year. Does that give me a lower chance of being selected since I won't be here for more than a year? And I would say that no, it doesn't. As a fourth year, you've taken more classes and you've learned skills in those classes, which are going to be relevant towards research. And I think that actually will give you a leg up.
Yeah, I think if you just communicate and make that clear and just tell them like, hey, like I didn't to PI of your interest. I didn't really think I wanted to get into research until my senior year, and you can just be straight up honest because as a transfer, I hear this a lot amongst my peers, and they had that regret, like, oh, I should have started when I first got here. But then the caveat to that is like, well, we're here for our first year, we're just trying to get settled, but in our senior year, we're here, but we don't want to have any regrets when we graduate. And we're at our university, and research is one of those things that it's not that like you're supposed to do, but it's just like this is the place to do it, and if it's something that you want to do, like actively go out and do that, make it clear, like you don't want to like have any regrets when you graduate, if you want to be that transparent and upfront. Because I often hear that from my peers and it's really awful to hear, to be honest. And if the lab is just taking undergraduates to do research, you're more than welcome. If they have a project and you just want to get that experience, just be involved and just totally make that clear. Have that expectation.
Yeah, I think definitely I've seen different labs accept seniors a lot. So yeah, not a concern.
A second part of another question was, what is a good strategy or format for emailing professors about research?
Yes, I think that's a great question. And there definitely is a strategy, like, introducing yourself and your name and your major, and maybe, I don't know how personal you want to make it be, but it's sort of, it's basically a cover letter, right? So, but in email form, and then just really expressing your interests. So I don't know if you've written a cover letter before. I didn't have to until recently, but just go online and Google cover letter, and then really emphasize, the point in the cover letter where you talk about how you want to join or be in this position, how you're qualified. Just talk about the research and talk about, what interests you. And it's totally okay to like get things wrong when you're discussing their research too, because you're an undergrad and you're really not expected to know exactly what the research is doing because they've probably been working on it for 20 years and you've just read it a few minutes ago. So, but yeah, just try it. Just show your interest in the research.
Yeah, to add on to that, as well as the comment about, how do you get a professor to know me better? What I personally recommend for transfer students, as well as what I've done, is scheduling informational interviews. And that was something that was kind of a foreign concept to me. It's like, oh, what is that? And it's really like essentially you scheduling office hours and just like a one-on-one conversation similar to this. You're just having a conversation about the research. And that's something you can ask for in an email if you don't feel comfortable asking straight up, like, hey, you're taking undergraduates, But how you ask that is definitely what Sarah was saying. Like, it's that approach on how you ask that like definitely hits the mark of, you're a professional, you're like serious about joining a lab and being interested in research. But you can take it a step further and ask for that informational interview if you don't feel comfortable. And if you're just interested in the research itself and you're not really interested in joining the lab, just having a conversation, that's one way to get that started.
Yeah, and if you're concerned about how long you should make your email, or because some people say you should be short and to the point, but then others say that you should try to add as much information as you can. One method is to actually go to the professor's website and see what they've written about themselves. And if they're just short and to the point, then that's probably what might be best to email them with. But if they, talk all about their family and their history, then I think being a little bit longer in your email and talking more about yourself would be a good idea.
I'd like to add also that the URC is recording a webinar about crafting an email to professors. And so we'll be posting that recording probably up by Friday on our website. So you can look for it there too to get more tips. Great feedback, thank you.
I also saw that somebody asked if there was a way to set up mentor meetings for undergrad research, and I would totally be happy to meet with you as a URA. If that's what you're looking for, or if you want, somebody else, we can set that up for you too. But just know that like as undergraduate research ambassadors, we have met with, or I've like scheduled personal meetings with people to kind of like, check up on them every now and then to see how the research is going. So that's totally doable, and we'd love to do that if you're interested. Just send a message. So yeah.
All right, here we go. Taking my own advice here. So that advice, what I'm doing right now is, if it's awkward and like really quiet, just talk about research. So Maddie, what is field work like? Because I know for me, I'm in the lab, so I'm like that typical, oh, you're just in the lab. That's really boring. But then on the flip side, I'm doing computational work, so field work isn't something that I'm exposed to.
Yeah, fieldwork is a lot of fun. It's perfect actually for being online because I can be out in the field and I can social distance because I'm out by myself. So it's actually really great for during these COVID times. But it can be frustrating sometimes when you're out and you haven't collected any data at all. But it can be really rewarding too. I've taken a lot of pictures and videos of my insect species. And it's a lot of fun.
Are there any challenges that come up doing a research in the field?
I would say you should be prepared. I did get my car stuck in sand at some point, and that was not very fun. I had to call 911 to get out. But I had water. I was ready. I had done my heat illness training, so I knew how to rest and not get heat illness, which was good. So I would just say you need to be prepared. And definitely, if you're going to be out where there's not very good cell reception, you definitely need to make sure that your faculty mentor knows where you're going. And knows the time that you'll be back. I think that is really helpful, especially because sometimes I'm going out and I worry about my safety, but I'm like, okay, but if anything happened, at least my faculty mentor knows where I am.
Thank you.
Any transfers in the audience? Oh, so we have a question here. Is there a max number of labs we should reach out to? I'll let someone speak on that. I think Sarah mentioned earlier that you also cold emailed some professors. So what was that experience like? Did you set oh, I need to email this many professors and no more than that, or?
I just emailed one because I really wanted to join her lab. So yeah, I don't know. You emailed like quite a few, right,
I
Thomas?
emailed 8 to 10, yeah. So there's no max. It's really a matter of like interest and just kind of hoping they get back to you. And speaking of that, like we're doing grad applications right now for PhD programs, and I emailed this one professor, but then I'm still waiting, and it's been 2 months. So, and I followed up. So at that point, it's like, all right, I think I need to move on. So it's like you can reach out to as many as you want, but it really depends on who gets back to you, to be honest.
Yeah. I think reaching out to fewer rather than, but I'm just going based off of my experience, right? Because that's the only thing that I can do. But I think that because I reached out to one person, she was new to the campus. She'd never had an undergrad before. I was the only one that applied and things like that. So I think having just emailed her would made me like I was really able to invest in it, and I really showed that I cared, and I really like personalized it. So I think there's a risk of just like when you email a ton of professors, sometimes it can like come across like they can tell, like maybe I don't know, they might be
Like
able
you
to tell
don't
if
copy
you're
and paste
really
to
hitting
every
a different
single
one.
one. You still
What's
tailor
that?
it to each one.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
absolutely true.
just
Yeah,
make
you
that clear.
hopefully
Yeah.
personalize it as well. But yeah, so advantages to both probably. Yeah, I
Yeah.
don't think there's a right.
I think that's an important point to personalize it, and because you want to show your enthusiasm and your commitment for that line of research. Thomas, I wanted to ask you about publication. So that
Yes.
you were
Very.
engaged with that. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, it's a very painstaking process, to be quite honest, because we're all students, right? So we're also taking classes. And when you're okay, this is kind of, I don't know if it's uncommon because I can't compare myself to other people, but apparently a first author publication is somewhat a very lucrative topic of discussion. So I have a project in which I am doing a first author publication for 2 of those projects in the first lab, which means, you're going to be the one doing most of the work and the writing, and if not the experimental work. Um, Hence why you are first author, because you are doing the most work. And so, in I guess in order of the amount of work done, then there's the second and third and whatnot. For my other lab that I'm a part of in that project, I am going to be a co-author, which obviously means I'm not doing the grunt of the work and the most of the work that leads the project. In fact, as you can probably imagine, as co-authorship, you're doing part of the work. So for me, I'm just developing part of the software to help analyze the data that's being generated for the person doing most of the work and is leading the experiment. Um, so as part of co-authorship, we're essentially, you contributed to the project, and so they're acknowledging your contributions. And if you're part of, if you contribute more work, whether that be part of the experiment or more engaged, then it gets a little controversial with, oh, are you now like second author, third author? So I'm not sure, and I've heard that this is quite an uncommon thing for undergraduates, and particularly for some graduate students, because I've come to realize some graduate students don't even have publications. So that's it's definitely, I guess, a blessing for me to have these opportunities, and especially have to have multiple publications in the works as an undergraduate, and especially as a transfer, because we're here for only 2 years. So I've done all this in 1 year.
Thank you. Are there publications for undergraduate journals that publish?
Yeah, through the program in McNair, at least, I can't speak on the other programs, but I'm sure you have more insights than me, rather. For McNair, we do have a requirement as part of the program to have a project in which we do publish to our own journal. Now, I say this with the caveat because I'm taking this from my own faculty mentor, that the value in which where we publish does matter. And so with that said, even though, yes, you have a publication, to the faculty, it's more valuable to publish in a journal where, you're part of the field and other scientists are referencing either your work, which is super cool, but also referencing the journal itself. So if you're not a part of these programs, for example, McNair, like me, it's totally fine. And to be honest, A topic of discussion as well is that I've come to realize being a part of McNair is, presenting research, publishing research to general conferences or to the general public versus those in the field. And so that's where that step in quality comes in, because now you're contributing to the field. And what that means is your field of study. Um, so that's, if you want to take it to that next improvement on how, like what is the next step essentially beyond general conferences and beyond speaking to the general audience.
Speaking of presenting and conferences, can each of you share your experience attending or presenting at your research at a conference?
Sure. So I have not been to many conferences, actually. I sort of missed that opportunity with COVID, and I was really excited to go this year. But from the one that I did do was the Undergraduate Research Center. Like the Undergraduate Research Conference was like the big one that they do every single year in the springtime, which I highly recommend checking out. I think this past year it was virtual, so that was pretty cool. But it was pretty cool. I think you meet a lot of different people, and especially at this past conference, the Undergraduate Research Conference, this one is specifically for undergrads. So you don't have these like postdocs walking around saying, "What is this? What are you doing?" And they've been working on it for so long, and you're like, "Ah, okay." So it's a little bit more comfortable. I have attended other conferences that aren't made for undergraduates, and I think it's really awesome to see all the collaboration that goes on, and just really, someone that wants to be a future scientist or, trying to be a scientist, it's really inspiring to see other people collaborating with their work. So yeah, totally recommend. It's pretty great.
Yeah, so I also did the virtual undergraduate research conference, and I originally was going to do a poster presentation, but then because it switched to virtual format, you could end up doing like a slideshow presentation. So that's what I ended up doing, and it was a lot of fun making the video, and it was kind of cool because people could comment on specific timestamps of the video, and then I could respond to their questions, which was really nice. So I liked that virtual aspect of it. But yeah, I hope that we'll be able to do more conferences later, but sure.
Yeah, likewise. I've presented at the virtual undergraduate research conference as well. And then, as I mentioned, in McNair, as part of the program, we have our UCLA National McNair Symposium that we did over the summer. So that was the second presentation. And with the current project that I'm working on, we're projecting to present at a technical conference, hopefully sometime winter, for RosettaCon. That's one of the conferences for protein engineering. I'm also considering of presenting the research with my second lab for the computational work, but we'll see how that goes. Just because it's, again, I haven't led that project, so we'll see how that works out. Let's see. I do want to mention that even though we're speaking about conferences that we spoke at, I highly recommend also just attending conferences and or symposiums. I've actually attended more conferences and symposiums that I've spoken at, which shouldn't be surprising. And I say that because when you attend these conferences, you can get more insights to some of the speakers there and make those either industry or academic connections. Even though, as Sarah's mentioned, as when you're there presenting, even though you might have postdocs walking around and kind of roasting you, judging your work, you can go the opposite way, flip the script per se, and go to these symposium and conferences and just ask them questions. And then through those conferences, whether virtual or in person, you do get the opportunity to meet potential faculty who could take you on as graduate students, if that's something you're interested in, or otherwise just build those networking.
Thank you. Yes, we will be holding the Undergraduate Research Conference again in April 30th and May 1st. Could possibly be a virtual one as well. And while we're on the topic, I wanted to mention that we have a virtual travel award. And for this quarter, we're also allowing that reimbursement for registration, if there's a registration cost for a conference, for attending, even if you're not presenting. So even if you attend a conference, because we're well aware of the benefits, and a lot of them are virtual and online. So it's an opportunity to expand your knowledge and your networking as well. So check that out. It's on our awards page. I put the link for awards in the chat. And I'll also put, I've also got the link for programs in the chat as well. You can go ahead and unmute yourself if you want to ask a question to the panel.
Hi, it's a little random, but I was just wondering if you have any recommendations for applying to research positions where they ask for letter of recommendations. I know that sometimes it's preferred that you get a recommendation from someone in the field or related to the field of study, but other times it may be better to get a personal letter of recommendation. I was just wondering if you have a take on how to approach letters of recommendations.
I think it probably depends on where you're, like what year you're in. You're talking about letter of recommendations to apply to a lab?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So I think it probably depends on your year. I think if you're an incoming freshman, they probably understand that, like, if you have someone from high school, like that also might work. That really knows you well. And then you can also use like your college apps probably as a letter of rec. But I never had to use a letter of recommendation to apply, so I can't speak directly to what that's like. So yeah, but if you're in your upper years, you can always ask a professor that you've connected with, hopefully through your classes.
Awesome. Thank you.
Maddie, did you want to speak on that? I've been speaking too much.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say the same thing. If you have a professor who you've been in their class with and you really like them, then I think asking them might be a good idea. But yeah, I haven't had to have letters of recommendation specifically to get in labs.
All right. So then Thomas is going to be the dark horse here and tell you that if you're going to go to grad school, you have to kind of play the game and be really strategic. And if you're a transfer like me, which I have no idea if you are, but listen, like as a transfer, we're here for 2 years. So we got to do all of these things in like 1 year. Otherwise it's too late, because the 1 year that we're here, we're applying to grad school and we have to get 3 or 4 letters of recommendation. So this is where Thomas is the dark horse now, because it's like, no, if you really want letters of recommendation, yes, it depends, but also you need to realize you can't just kind of like force a relationship, right? So what Sarah was mentioning as like, you know, yeah, in hindsight, you should get professors that get to know you. So in the hierarchy of like letters of recommendation in which you mentioned, you kind of hinted at it. Ideally, it's someone with a PhD. Ideally, it's from, you know, a university. Yes, obviously, ideally, it would be someone in your field in which you are a mentee of. Hence why you, when you do research, that's one possible recommendation, because your PI is essentially mentoring you. And so that's already easy one. For applying to labs, I am assuming you're hinting at graduate school, in which I'm going through that process. So you need to have this foresight and be actively engaged with the community. And by that, I mean your professors, and building those connections either through research or just having a communication so they can speak who you are and your work ethic beyond your GPA or beyond your grade, because that's the whole point of a letter recommendation. And especially if you're a researcher or a scientist applying to graduate school, particularly for a PhD program similar to me, you are a professional researcher, so they need to speak on your research skills. I know for me, some of the tactics that I've done in the 1 year that I have been here, most commonly is just reaching out, getting into a lab. That's already one. Another one that I was doing was communicating with the professor and meeting them on a regular basis, just having a conversation and using them as like an advisor. Like, hey, you're a third party. I want to run this by you, get your opinion on this, and just have that communication, keep in touch. Another thing that I did when I mentioned, I'm not sure if you were here, but how I got into my second lab was I didn't like the way they were teaching the class. And I told them, here are all the things that I found were wrong and I didn't like. Here are the improvements. I want to be a part of these improvements and these changes. And just kept pestering him, to be quite honest, and just saying like, hey, and this is what I was talking about being engaged and building that relationship, but organically, not forcefully, just saying like, hey, can we still do this? I want to be a part of this change, and just following up, keeping that communication.
Thank you. That was great advice. I'll definitely take that into account.
Can we ask like what path you want to choose, I guess? So we can, like,
Well, I'm looking to do undergrad research, but I have only really formed a relationship with a professor who, in hindsight, I've done the worst in his class, but I took a seminar with him afterwards, and he's gotten to know me, and I feel like he can vouch for my character and my work ethic,
That's awesome. Very cool.
circumstances permitting.
Yeah, that's important. That's the most important, because we all have circumstances going on. So if they can speak on that and who you are as a person, that's great. That's like the best form of a letter recommendation beyond just, oh, this person got an A in my class, I guess I'll write them one. Because everyone else got an A, so what makes you any different at that point?
Thank you.
And I'll share just a note from faculty, from talking with faculty. Give plenty of time when you request those letters of recommendation. They're very busy people, and and include all of the information that they need to write that letter too. So including your CV, your resume, and giving them the links or the information of the program that you're applying to is all helpful. So you want to make it easy for them too, to write that letter.
Thank you. I'm sincere. Well, I think I'm gonna head out. I have to catch up on a project. But thank you for your advice. Have a nice night.
Thank you for coming by.
does anybody else have any? Oh yeah, for sure, no problem. Does anybody else have any like questions, comments? You have all of our attention now. So
Okay.
no, it's us. Okay.
Hmm.
Well,
Cool.
thank you all for the great advice and great answers. That was cool. And I'm going to stop the recording here.